Hey everybody, and welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today we're going to be going over the second part of the 10 things you need to know about indie filmmaking. We really wanted to take a look at the first 8 movies that we finished, lovingly termed the Hateful Eight, and we wanted to basically go back, take a look at 10 different areas that we thought are very important for any indie filmmaker to just better understand and what we wish we knew going into it. So today, the topics we're going to be covering are going to be pre-production, production, post-production, marketing, and distribution. And we think that these items, along with the first part, if you haven't seen that, check that out, really should help you out on your indie filmmaking journey because it is really tough out there. So anything we can do to help out, we are always looking to do so. And before we start again, Girl in Cabin 13 is our newest film. It is still up on Tubi. If you want to go ahead, check that out. Be sure to take a look at it. We got a lot of really cool other things in our community. We have a Discord channel with our super fans, and our super fans are actually going to be reviewing one of our newest movies. So it's going to be really cool. If you want to be part of that, super easy. Just follow our links for that. So let's go ahead. Let us hop into part 2 of the 10 things you need to know indie filmmaking. And I just really think that, a lot of these items that we're going to try and boil down are just things that like you wish you could have told yourself, going into Gone. And even so, hey, we might not have even listened to ourselves. It might just be something where still the best thing that you can do is going to be having the experience and going through it. But let's go ahead. Let's hop into pre-production. And kind of to start off, Brendan, I just want to get a good idea, like, how do you think your thoughts have changed from when you started pre-production to where you are now? And I mean, we're actually wrapping up, for the most part, pre-production in our newest film that we're going to be filming in a week, a Shapeshifter plot. What do you think has kind of shifted just in your mentality, the things that are important that you don't know? Just walk me through that change.
Yeah, I mean, I think pre-production is probably the most crucial part of filmmaking. And I think that with each film that I make, I go back and I'm like, well, I wish I would have spent more time in pre-production. And then the next film, we spend more time in pre-production. And, it's a continuing trend. This is our latest movie that we're about to shoot next week. And I spent the most time in pre-production on this movie out of all the 11 that we did before. So I think pre-production is it makes everything a lot smoother. When you go on set, you really shouldn't have to make a lot of changes. You shouldn't have to give a ton of direction. You should just be able to get on set. Everybody's aligned. They know what they're trying to do. They know how to do it. They know your vision. So you can just get there and you get momentum going and you just move on from there. When I first started out, I was like, oh, we'll figure it out, as we go. And don't do that. It's not very good. And you're going to end up with like a lot of issues in production. You're going to have a lot of things that, are done not very well. And the most important thing is when you have to stop and figure out how to do things, you're essentially stopping all that momentum. And I've talked about it before. As a director, especially an indie director, time is your biggest asset. My goal is to get the actors going and working together and getting in a flow as quickly as they possibly can. And then my job is to make sure I try and keep them in that flow state for as long as possible, because that's when you're cranking through different pages, you're getting good performances out of the actors. And once that flow stops, it's difficult to get them back up to that level. So when you're stopping and you're trying to figure out how to do different either scare scenes, or you're trying to just really fix up dialogue, or you're trying to really work with actors because their performance isn't what you want, you're going to stop that momentum. You're going to slow down on set. And all of a sudden that time deadline, that time crunch that you're continually fighting is going to become a big time issue. So my recommendation, put as much time into pre-production as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing is you take your time for granted until you've been through the production phase. And, as you mentioned, the more pre-production you do, even if it's just having the ability for you to go ahead and just talk these things through or even show them the scene. I mean, I remember for Girl in Cabin 13, we did a lot of the scares. We did a lot of kind of the things that we could then pull it up on our phone. It was me and you filming it. And hey, this is, what we're looking to do. Hey, this is what we're trying to do, versus trying to figure it out on set. Every single second and minute just adds up, and you are fighting for these seconds, you're fighting for these minutes on set, when in pre-production you have the flexibility of the time frame. And I really do think a lot of indie producers take it for granted and almost look at doing a lot of things that realistically should be in pre-production, whether it's walking through the script, whether it's getting a clear idea. Just reviewing the script now, we really kind of have like bold little captions that are basically saying to, the actors and everyone on the team, this is what we're looking to do. This is the point of the scene. So immediately when we get on set, we can point to that and go, okay, let's execute on it. And if you can go ahead and just ensure that you have a good amount of every second you put for pre-production is going to pay off in that production time frame. So just really look at doing that. A big advice is, especially if you have a DP you're working with, or it's yourself or something, just try and film a few things specifically. Maybe the intro is usually where we focus our time, the climax, the scares, just things that, the biggest benefit and experience is when you have that finished product you can look at, because then you can immediately be like, okay, this works and this doesn't work. And then how do we tweak it and how do we change it from there? So right away, that's kind of just something that you do not get the perk of until you have a finished product, and you can do this in pre-production. And I highly recommend, even if you're months away from your production, just chip away at the pre-production, have a better idea. There's no reason you can't refilm scenes and refill things. So if you're an indie producer, and a lot of times they just make one or two features, and they find themselves jumping right into the production phase. They're making decisions that should have been ironed out way before. They're making all of these things that should have been taken care of before, and they're trying to do it in production, and that just slows you down. Realistically, besides filming the movie, the vast majority of these things can be decided and firmly locked down during the pre-production phase. Now, we always have things that change on site to some degree, so you're going to have that. But the less you can have that and the more on the same page you can be, the smoother your production is going to be. So what would you say now is just, a quick high level of your process, and what's kind of the main things that you would, tell indie film producers to do when it just comes to working with the actors, getting everyone ready? Give me almost like a T-minus, like, hey, we're 30 days out. What are you doing? We're a week out. Just a little bit of a high level breakdown of the time schedule we use now.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just try and do something related to pre-production every single day, because time will catch up to you. If you're like, oh, we're 30 days out, I have some time to work on this later, or I could do it tomorrow or the next day. I try every day to do something as far as pre-production, whether it's testing equipment, whether it's working with actors, or whether it's like working on the script. The thing that I've learned from this one is to really take the time to go through the script with each actor. And I'm doing 3 times. We're going through the script 3 times for this latest feature film. The first one's just going scene by scene and explaining what I'm trying to get from that scene, the specific beats that they have to hit. And I'm also talking about their character, what I want from their character, and I'm getting their feedback, what they think about the character. And, we're trying to get a meet in the middle, essentially, to try and create the best character that is similar to their personality, or at least has like a little bit of them in it. So it's just like a little bit easier for them to act if they can pull from some of their life experiences. The second meeting is just a deep dive into just the dialogue. So they understand their character. They understand what the character is trying to do, what I'm looking from the character. Now we just go piece by piece and we read through the whole script, right? And so that makes sure, number one, that they're actually reading the script and they understand the script. And what I'm looking for is just dialogue that's difficult to say, dialogue that doesn't sound natural, or dialogue they can bring up like feedback. Like a lot of the feedback we got from the last script edit was just, this one character is being mean to the other character, or these two, the chemistry is not there, the relationship's not there. So like all this is super valuable feedback that I could take and, fix up the script. And then the final pre-production part is the one we're doing next week, which is just a table read. Once again, I'm not a huge fan of table reads because, you're essentially just reading with all the characters, and I'm not getting a ton of feedback from it. Usually the one-on-ones are a lot more beneficial, but the table reads are good because it gets everyone in one place and they can get comfortable with each other. You really want to be comfortable with the other cast and the crew, and it just gets everyone in one location. They can kind of talk and, just feel more comfortable with each other so that when they meet on set, it's not the first time that they're meeting. They can build a little bit of rapport. So I've seen that movies with table reads that we do beforehand, usually it's just the actors come in a little more warm and they can, get going immediately, as opposed to when they first meet each other and then I'm telling them, all right, we got to act right now, ready, go. They're just not as quick to get up to like that momentum zone that I want.
It really goes back to, it's going to save you time on that production. We're probably going to end up hopping into each one of these 10 topics for a full episode to really kind of dive deep into it. Because again, if you have your crew, you're going to be doing a lot more pre-production type things, working with your DP. We have the benefit of a very condensed crew. So, it's really kind of just us and the actors, which allows us to really then hone in on those things. But being able to, almost get them through that bell curve that we've talked about before, where, when you start off as an actor, you kind of need to get warm, you need to get warmed up. And we find that happening all the time. And if you can kind of get everyone used to each other and the table reads are just kind of on that page, you're already saving yourself a tremendous amount of time when it comes to getting them into a groove and getting them working together on set. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the production side of things. And production to me is really, it's so unique and different. We've talked about it before. It almost feels like a time warp. You get on set, the real world doesn't exist because all you basically do is wake up, film, sleep, wake up, film, sleep. And it's by far the most surreal experience. And it's really, the most fun in the moment, but it's also one of the most hardest to do because you are pushing yourself mentally, you're pushing yourself physically, you're pretty sleep deprived, just all of these things. So it's like this long 7-day marathon almost of mentally and physical. And at the end of the day, this is your one shot. This is the one thing where if you screw it up, you can't go back. You can't just turn Premiere off for the night and say, hey, I'll get back to it tomorrow morning. You can't push off the pre-production. This is your one shot that you have to make your idea come to life. At the end of the day, once it's done, it's done. So what are your thoughts on production and how you just kind of feel and approach it now?
It's gotten a little bit easier. I still get very nervous before the shoots just because there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot, like you're essentially one, deleted memory card or an actor like just not showing up or the location having an issue from essentially losing pretty much most of your money, if not all your money. So it's very dangerous. It's a very fragile thing to shoot a movie. So it's always stressful. And I don't relax until, the final shot's done. And then I really don't relax until I take a look at the footage on Premiere to make sure there's no visual issues. There's no audio issues. Until then, I'm just perpetually nervous. But I think you just have to really make sure that you're aware of the time that you're operating in, because time is just such a big pressure. And once you're fighting against time, you're going to be more stressed and everything's going to go faster. And then the actors start to sense that you're stressed and you're moving faster. So then they have more pressure on them to deliver their lines. It can spiral out of control very, very quickly. So, I'd recommend to just make sure you properly schedule out your shoot, and you just got to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Really, it's just like any time that you could sleep, do it. And usually I'm running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, but it's like once that camera, I cut for the night and I'm like, all right, we're wrapped. I'm literally in bed 5 minutes later because I have to be the first person up to get everything ready. If you're an actor on set, anytime there's any kind of downtime, I tell all my actors to just try and take a 5 to 10 minute power nap, 20-minute power nap here. Stay off your phone, just try and, get as much sleep as possible, because sleep just really on these shoots if you're not getting enough sleep, or you're not used to like a shooting environment where you're running on the lack of sleep, it could be very detrimental. And I think a lot of people have a lot of issues. When they're sleep deprived, their memory starts to go, they start to get really tired, they kind of get a little bit loopy. So I think, making sure you're eating, you're drinking, you're getting enough sleep, and you have enough time to get all the shots and do what you want to do with this movie is probably my biggest advice to indie filmmakers.
Yeah, I would really say, I mean, the first thing is scheduling the time out, take a look, make a plan of this is how long I need to film this movie. If you haven't had any experience, it might be a little bit tougher in that sense to do so, just because now we have a really good feel for how long shots can take. So it's a little bit easier for us. But with that being said, give yourself 2 more days. Just do it. Just give yourself 2 extra days. I guarantee you're going to use them. It's by far the best thing you can do. And then if you ever get to the point where it's like, hey, we got 2 extra days, go take a look at your footage and pick something else up that you might want. Go redo a scene you weren't so confident with. It's so much better to have that than to have yourself fighting this time frame. And I mean, it's happened pretty much for all of our movies. I mean, even The Haunting of the Murder House, which was by far, in my opinion, one of the smoothest ones we've had, we were still collecting B-roll until the sun rose up, and it was 24 hours, no sleep. And again, I think that just goes back to us wanting to maximize every second of it, knowing, hey, it's the final push, so we can kind of get ourselves over that body, that final hump of just pushing your body in sleep deprived or being sleep deprived. But with it, having an extra day and having that, it just is going to completely shift the entire set. It's going to allow you to breathe. And like you said, those are the problems that will continue to escalate. One wrong thing happens, something happens here, and then next thing you know, all of production is thrown completely haywire. We've had it happen with The Morgan Estate. We've had it happen with Devil in the Room, Into the Forest. Essentially every single one of the movies you name, we've had it happen to some degree. And these are things that no matter how much you plan in pre-production, you're not going to be like, oh, well, what happens if this happens? It's just going to pop up. So I think giving yourself some extra time is really critical. And then really understand that, when you are working with the actors and whatnot, it's your job to really kind of lead the momentum. And I think momentum is really one of the things I want to talk about next, just with production, because there's a lot of things that can ruin momentum and there's a lot of things that can improve momentum. So I'm going to talk real quick about things that I feel like will slow down your momentum. And I think that's food. And it's also making sure they have access to caffeine and things to kind of keep them up and moving. If you don't have those things, so if you end up having to break and waiting for food and people start getting hungry, that's going to be there. So really try and make sure you always have food on hand. Typically, we basically go to Publix and we ask, the actors, what do you want to have? So at any point in time, if they're not in a scene, they can go take their power nap. They can get some food. They can continue to just really work on their own time for getting themselves, in a happy state of just caffeine and food wise. And then the second thing is really making sure that if it takes a while for you to go ahead and set up one scene to the other, you're not just having the actors sit around. You're either telling them, hey, you have some time off right now, or you're saying, hey, go ahead and do this. So I think those are some of the things that slow down production. What would you kind of identify as like things that like, hey, this might be a mud trap for you to get into and try and do your best to avoid it?
Yeah, I think what you said is, the main things. I think be very careful where you schedule breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Try and do those after giant scenes are completed, where you will have some time to either, break down the set or try and move the set. That gives them like a little bit of time to eat. And then just make sure you have a lot of like finger food or food that they can grab quickly if they're hungry. Where they don't necessarily need to, if I have to go move the lights or change out a card or something, they can quickly go get something to eat. Because if they start to get hungry, they're going to get tired. They're going to get cranky. It's just not going to be a good situation. So just be careful, how you schedule that stuff, but you really have to be the one in charge of pushing them to get them to continually stay moving. And 10 minutes turns to 20 minutes to 30 minutes. A 10-minute break could all of a sudden be a 30-minute break, and those are 20 minutes you never get back. Just starting in general in the morning, we usually, like, for example, sometimes we'll have like an 8 o'clock start time, and I won't start shooting till like 8:30 because there's just like 30 minutes of, people are just doing whatever they're doing. So right now I'm like, all right, look, I want you guys to be rehearsing at 8 o'clock. I'm turning this camera on. I'm pressing record at 8:10. And, that's your job, to be there on that pressing record. Because if you're not doing that and you're off doing whatever, or you're off eating food, or, you're taking a shower, or your time isn't on their schedule, the actors are going to, not listen to you. They're going to just go off and do their own thing. So you really are responsible for everything and keeping to the schedule and keeping the momentum on the set. But it goes back to planning, know what shots you're going to do, know when you're going to have breaks, know when you're going to have breakdowns, so you can let them eat, let them rest, let them recover. But it also goes back to what you said too, is just make sure they're always doing something. If they have downtime, I mean, they're going to get tired, and it's going to be hard to bring them back up, because they're going to start thinking about, like their mind, the adrenaline goes down when they're not doing anything. So they're already thinking, man, my body hurts. I'm tired. I haven't slept. I'm kind of hungry. I'm exhausted. And all this stuff starts to spiral, where if I do have to break down a scene, I need 10 to 15 minutes. I'll just bring them into the next area and be like, all right, look, start blocking this out. Like, see if you can find something to do as far as like action. Can you like open a can or drink or move over here, or just kind of block it out with each other while I'm setting up these lights. I could give them direction while I'm setting up the camera. I could, tell them what I'm trying to do, and I just have them rehearse. So we break down one thing. If I know it's going to take 20 minutes, I just move the actors into the room that I need, have them start blocking it out, and have them running dialogue. So they hit that state and they keep it going. Even when I have to take a break, the actors will at least keep moving. So once again, it just comes back to momentum. You have to get them to that level, and you have to do your best to keep them going at that same like momentum level until you have like a lunch or dinner break where it's like an hour and a half of actual downtime.
Yeah, I think it really is your responsibility for keeping the momentum. And a lot of times, one thing we do is, we typically have a speaker on set, and when we know there's going to be like a big breakdown, or like you're just filming something that doesn't need audio, we'll be blasting some tunes just to keep everyone going and everyone motivated and happy. So anything you can do to really keep the momentum moving forward is your job. And speaking of that, those are some things to look at avoiding. What are some things that you can do to almost hype up the team and the staff and everything? Wrapping an actor is always a big one. I think highlighting what a hard scene is, and almost kind of like, hey, if we're done with this scene, it's just 1, 2, 3, and then we're done and we're out of here. Giving them kind of the goal line. What do you think is good ways that you can just really push an actor and the team to just, give their best performance and keep on going and chugging along?
Yeah, man, I think you make sure that everyone's on the same page. So one thing that we do is I'll take the shots for the day and I'll put them on a checklist. And so essentially the actors will go, when we complete a scene, they'll go and cross it off the board. It builds momentum. It keeps them happy. They understand exactly what's going on. And even with this one, I've actually broken down the shooting schedule with scenes that need extra attention or are a little bit more technical, a little bit more difficult, because I hype myself up for these scenes because I get excited for very difficult scenes, scenes that are very vital to the movie. My adrenaline gets going, their adrenaline gets going. And I think they feed off of that. When you finish a big scene, there's like, you won essentially. So there's like camaraderie between the actors, you're moving forward, you take down a big scene. And that's a good boost for them. And I think you have to, once again, you have to be hyped up. You have to be having fun. You have to let that flow and let the actors feed off you as well. Just to keep everyone in that like momentum zone. Music's a great way to do it. I'm trying to think of something else, but showing them little cuts of the scenes, as long as it doesn't like distract them, but just showing them, that the footage is really good, that, or telling them that their performance was great. We go back, we look at the footage, we always like hype it up a little bit more. just to get them excited about the project, to keep them, interested and focused. And, they all like to hear it's a super crazy thing to do with like your ego. Like you're super nervous. You don't know if you're giving a good or bad performance, but if we can go there and I can go look at the footage and be like, yes, you're killing it. Keep doing what you're doing. They start to get confidence, and you really want confident actors. If you have confident actors will move fast. They'll be involved. And once again, they'll hit that momentum level and they'll stay there.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the major things I would focus on. And, again, it goes back to having an on-set editor, I think is one of the more important things that you should look at doing, because it does allow you to do those things. One thing that I look at doing is I get the footage, I edit it, and I look at little cuts that, they look good. It looks like it's going to be, a great scene. They did a good job. And then I can go to the actor and be like, dude, you crushed this. You did a really good job. And, I mean it because they did. And being able to have that instant feedback of, we're doing it. We're good. A lot of times, thankfully, all of our movies have been the best movie. We haven't really run into the occasion where the movie we filmed was worse than the last one yet. So fingers crossed that continues. But with that being said, they're going to feed off of me being like, we've made 10 movies. This is our 11th movie and this is the best. You did an amazing job. This is going to be great. And that's picking it up. And again, getting them invested in the project. Because if you really think about it, most actors are used to showing up on set, doing their acting, and then maybe never seeing, the final product ever. Seen the final product in a year and a half, 2 years, a trailer. Maybe they get a little bit further, they're real. But if you can kind of get them in already about the project and the turnaround, that's really how you can get some good feedback. So those are some really important things. I think another quick ones, like let's just think of maybe some rapid fire tips. Don't delete your footage. Just buy a hard drive that's big enough to store all of it. What do you think maybe are some other little rapid fire ones? Again, we'll go in deeper with like actual production and do a full length episode, but like quick little tidbits that you can almost think of.
Geez, putting me on the spot with this one. Yeah, so just make sure like data management's good. Make sure you clean your lenses is like a big thing. I just took the lenses to get cleaned at a local shop today. Because they're going to have blood on them. They're going to have dust on them, especially if you're running gun. You want to make sure you have good, crisp, clean lenses. Make sure like that you take care of your equipment. Usually on set, like everything goes all over the place. You could very easily lose something. I'm missing like 2 wires right now that I had to reorder. So make sure you have good equipment management. Make sure you keep the set clean. A lot of times like trash will build up just because you have so many people moving. I would have like a giant trash can that you would just, and this is like something I'm going to be on people for this next shoot, because we just have too much clutter going on in the background of our shots. It wasn't bad in the last one because it was supposed to look like that. So it kind of was actually helping for set design, but it's just something you want to be aware of because you have to clean that up eventually. When we leave the location, you can spend 3 or 4 hours having to clean it up. And so if you can do that throughout the shoot, it'll make your job a lot easier. Make sure you have, finger food, apples, bananas, fruit, healthy stuff for the actors to eat. That's quick and easy. Let me think. I would go with the shot list checkoff board that we have. It's just like a dry erase board. And I just write down all the shots we're going to get, or not the shots, like all the sequences and the scenes that we're going to shoot during that day. It's really popular. The actors like to cross it off. It builds a lot of momentum. And then it's also, actors really want to be a part of like what you're doing. They want to know what the next shot is. And that just, instead of asking me a million questions or asking me what's next, they can go to the board and they can, look at the board and read it. The thing we're going to do for the next one is better data management as far as writing down when we're shooting a scene and which card we're actually filming to, because we have 2 or 3, or we're actually going to have about 6 different hard drives, and we run with 2 CFast cards. And when one fills up, we switch them out and we swap them out. Sometimes like different scenes will end up on different cards, and it's kind of hard to tell what you're shooting on during that day. So we're going to try and just write that down. So when you're editing and you're missing stuff, you're like, I know I have this shot, I just don't know where it is. So I could go back and reference like either a note card or a spreadsheet instead of trying to go through every single one of these cards and find the little scenes. I don't know, dude. I think that's pretty much all I got right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we kind of did a good, overview. Again, we'll get to the little nitty gritty of details when we have a longer podcast to just dive into each one of these subjects. I think those really kind of, capture the main things. And, the data management is going to be a really good slide into the next thing, which is the post-production process. So usually when we finish, a production shoot, we typically have maybe one or two pickups that we know we need to do. But for the most part, okay, let's start getting into that post-production process, mainly because we also have to think two things. Do we need to do any additional pickups that we didn't think about? And how's the overall movie starting to look right now? And I think really one of the big benefits that we have is the on-site editor and myself, because we can try and get as much as that taken care of, and also essentially start the post-production process with the production process. And I really look at now our post-production having almost kind of like 5 different levels. At least this is how I see it. You can see it completely different. But when it comes to the edits, I see the first edit is organized and rough. And all it is it's basically me taking the data, digesting it, putting it into the bins. I separate it by scenes. So eventually what will happen is in the Premiere folder that we have is, okay, scene 1 to 150, whatever it is. Scene 1 has all the takes from scene 1. Scene 2 has all of the takes from scene 2. And it's a simple process, but it is something that takes a ton of time just to go through all of it, just to do it then and there. From there, my next job is really getting us that live cut on set, which really is just the wide shots. It's kind of making sure we have transitions. It's making sure that scares came out good. So it's basically the big things. I see that being the first real process is the first rough. Then the second rough is kind of closer to a picture lock. I think that's the one where, kind of me and you will meet in the middle, or we'll basically go into each one of the scenes and add in the closes, add in the different medium shots, add in the different taste to it. Third is going to be the picture lock. Fourth is picture and sound. And then fifth is kind of like the final touches. And I think the murder house we kind of have on that 4th level right now. But that's kind of at least how I look at our editing process. What are your kind of thoughts on just the overall structure of it and what you look at?
Yeah, I think a lot of people get stuck on editing and writing a script. To me, they're kind of similar, where if you sit here and you're writing a script and you try to make the scene perfect, you try and make the dialogue perfect, it's going to take you a lot of time and it's going to cause a lot of frustration, and you're just not going to be able to complete the script. It's the same thing with editing. When you're going through the footage and you're trying to make the scene perfect, it's going to take you a lot of time, and it's like you're going to get frustrated, you're going to give up, and it's going to take you a long time to finish this. And I think this is a big mistake that a lot of indie editors and indie filmmakers make. They just get overwhelmed in both the script and the editing process. Where I think what works for me, and once again, this works for me, is I'll write a rough script and I'll just get the scenes on paper. I'll get 90 pages. That 90 pages could be good. Most likely it's going to be really bad. But then what I do is once I finish it, I go through it again, and then I go through it again, and then I go through it again. And each time things are changing, things are getting better. I'm finding plot holes. I'm taking them out. I'm adding new characters. I'm going in completely different directions with the script. And then eventually you get something that's pretty good. Then I'm like, all right, we could shoot this. With editing, it's the same thing. I just want to get an hour and 20 minutes of film, of a cut done, essentially. And it's going to be super rough. It's not going to flow well. There's going to be a lot of issues with it, but it's done. And then I go back and I start from the beginning and I do the same thing. I start to clean up little things. I try different variations. I'll send other people like, hey, what do you think about this? Do you like, variation A or variation B better? So I start to get feedback. And it takes me, 10 to 15 go-throughs of the editing process of that one timeline to get it to the point where I could show it to people like we're about to show the super fans. It takes 10 to 15 times to go through. And it's almost like you have like this square marble, and each time you go through, you're just chiseling away, you're making it better, you're making it better, you're making it better. You will never have a perfect movie on the first go through. So I think if you can get that out of your mind, you understand it's a process, that each time you go through, it's going to get better. You can look at like that, because then you keep momentum. You're always working on it. When I finish the timeline and I finish the movie, I know exactly what I'm going to do, which is start from the beginning and get it all the way through. And then once I finally get all the way through where there's no issues, where I don't have any notes, then it's ready for upload. And that's pretty much how I operate right now. I think it's a lot better. It's a much more friendly process on just myself, because I always know what the next step is. I always know what I need to do, as opposed to sitting there trying to figure out a scene. And, I could sit on one scene. Like I had one lock-in scene in this last movie that I worked on for like 2 weeks, and I still don't feel comfortable with it. But the fact that I just kept going and working on other parts of the movie kept the editing process going forward, where I could just stuck on that scene and be like, I'm not gonna, finish this movie until this scene is perfect. And then it might have been perfect 6 weeks from now, but then I would still have to do the rest. The 95% of the movie would have to still be edited. So you're slowing yourself down. So I just recommend that is just understand that this is a process that you have to go start to finish multiple times to get it to where it needs to be for an upload.
I think that's really a very key thing, again, as you mentioned, for the writing process, for the editing process. And I think that's one of the reasons why I do look at it, almost with that different tier level, because the goal is to get to a finished product for whatever that level is. Understand, okay, this is the rough. Understand, okay, this is a better version of the rough. But the whole goal is finishing it. Because I think that's exactly as you said. If you have the mentality where you start from the very first scene and you say, I need every single thing on this timeline to be perfect as I move forward, it would be such a huge task of just really bogging down. When if you're able to, on the first pass, get it 50% there, then you get another 20% there, then another 20% there, and then 10% there, you're good. And I think that's something that, we quickly have the rough turned around. I think The Hunt and The Murder House, I had the rough in like 2 weeks. Again, we were missing pickups, so there were a lot of scenes that were just like insert Kel in a van, which was a whole series of things that we did. But with that being said, we had the rough outline of this movie, and we could understand, okay, this is working, this isn't working. Okay, we're gonna have to go ahead and add a little more here and there. But it's motivational. Like, honestly, every time you can click export and you can sit down, it's way better than just finding yourself staring at the same scenes over and over and over again, forcing yourself to get to a finished product. So I think that is definitely an approach that we have now is, get completed, but know that there's going to be multiple levels of it being completed. I think if you can get through your project, because another thing is like, you can also push off hard decisions that you need to have by just avoiding them. If we make the entire rough right away, we can say, okay, we still need these pickup shots. We're probably going to need to add this. The seance scene didn't come out too good, so we're going to need to add like, more things for like the montage in the beginning, the just to kind of spice up that element of it. Just little things like that come up to give us a better understanding of where we're actually going to have to continue to put the work. Where if you just go through the whole process trying to make it perfect, you might just be like, yeah, I know I don't have this, but forget about it. Let me just go ahead and, work on this a little bit more. And then before you know it, you haven't picked up, Premiere or anything like that since then. So with that being said, I think that's a really good mindset to have. Let's kind of talk about just a little more technical. We both use Adobe Premiere for our main editing software. I'm of the personal opinion that I feel like all the editing softwares basically can do the same thing. And I'm also of the opinion that for the most part, you're really using just the basic functionality of the system. And then every once in a while, you're enhancing it a little bit. I think there's a lot of advanced things that you don't necessarily need to dive into as an indie filmmaker. When it comes down to the whole, bread and butter of it, to me is really kind of picking the scenes, understanding how they go together. And that's really where the majority of the work is. So I really don't believe it's as technical of a skill as a lot of people, look at it at first look. I'm not saying that this is easy and anyone can pick it up. There's definitely a lot of timing and things you need to learn. But I think the bulk of the operation that you're doing, really, for the most part, is just kind of, cutting scenes together. What are your thoughts on, technical skills? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would agree. I think 80% of the time it's just understanding where to cut things and how to cut things. And that's pretty much editing in a nutshell. To at least get you in a position to have a rough cut of your movie. I think the difference now is, like, I know when to bleed audio into other scenes, and I know how to, do better transitions, and I know cut points and how to, like, essentially mess with the pacing of a movie through editing. But that's not a technical skill. That's just something that I've learned from, making 10 movies. As far as like technical stuff, it usually comes down to problems. And a lot of that stuff is, you just go on YouTube and you type in your problem, and, there'll be a solution to it. Someone has a solution. And that takes a little bit of time. And obviously, like, dealing with audio issues, I've dealt with so many audio issues that I know how to fix them now. And, visual issues, if there's like an issue as far as like removing like a reflection, or there's like a piece of gear in the shot that you need to be removed, super easy to outsource that. Just send off the clip and someone could fix it up. I remember Girl in Cabin 13, we had a lot of lights in the in like the windows, and I had to send that off to a person on like Upwork to go through and just remove that, and, track out the camera lights. I think the only thing that you would need to learn is like how to properly color the movie. And there is proper color correction as far as like, you want to make sure the blacks are hitting a certain level, and that your color palette looks good for what it is. Like, there is quality control stuff that you have to pass as far as color goes, but for the most part it's subjective. And honestly, the best way to do color correction is to just put the look that you're trying to get, upload it into your camera, so that when you're shooting, you can match the camera settings to essentially what you want to get. So for example, I shot the murder house with a LUT on the camera. I took that footage and I just essentially put that LUT back on it in Premiere. And I really haven't touched the color for this cut that the super fans are about to see. I just dragged and dropped, right? And it's not perfect. Obviously, I'm going to have to go back and fix up a lot of things, but I've done nothing extensive on there other than like change just a little bit of exposure. And I'm rewatching the movie right now to give myself notes, and the color looks perfect. Like, obviously I can tell, and I'm finding issues with it that I'm going to have to, go in and just fix up the skin tones and, just do a little things like here and there. But for the most part, it looks pretty good. So total time that's going to spend on color is probably less than 10 hours. I'm really happy with that. It's really just some skin tones are a little crispy, but if you can get it in the camera, if you can get audio in the camera properly, if you can get the color and the settings on the camera properly, so you get that image, man, you're going to save yourself literally hundreds of hours of work just by taking 5 minutes to make sure what you're shooting is properly exposed and you're getting the white balance is to where it needs to be, and just making sure your audio is clear and that the levels that are coming in are proper levels, that you're going to actually level the audio to in the movie. So that's like my biggest thing. It's just save yourself time in production. And when you go to post-production, you're going to have a much easier time.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I'm also really happy that you mentioned that color is subjective, because there was a period of time where we were both doing color. And every time I would send you my color, you'd just be like, that is terrible. And I was like, I literally can't, I have no clue what you're looking for in that sense. Now, again, there's a look and everything there, but main point of it is, I feel like when it's something like the pacing, when it's like the cut, we can easily agree on that. But things like sound and things like color, yes, there are going to be mistakes, but if you get kind of into the nitty gritty of something, yeah, at some level it's subjective, and at some level, there is no right answer. The reason I bring this up is this is something you're going to encounter if you're working with an editor. If you're not the one actually doing the final cuts, doing the color and doing everything like that, you could say to an editor, I want this type of color. And in their head, they just see it differently. They just think it's supposed to be a different level. They think it's supposed to be a different thing on the spectrum, because there is a complete wide range of it. So those are a lot of things that, you know, it's not very technical. I remember when we first started it, it was like we did like Lydia.com for like just, you know, basic Premiere. Like, here's the different hotkeys, here's how you do all these things. And it was, I think, like a 10-hour course, and it was great. I mean, it showed you all of the buttons, it showed you a lot of the things. And like, realistically, I think it built the foundation that we had. And now it's just reps. I mean, I think the biggest difference now is like, you know, when I plug into Premiere, I'm basically like, I got my hotkeys here. I'm pushing B to get the razor tool. I got my bit. Like, you just know how to play in the software, and that's the time thing, and that, you know, extends it. So I don't think it's that technical of a thing, but I think what it is the more hours in editing that you do, the quicker that process becomes. Not so much because you're more technically sound, you're just more familiar. Like you were saying, you know when to bleed it, you know when these issues are coming up. And more importantly, having that experience in post-production ideally will prevent you from doing them in pre-production to begin with, in production. And that's really the benefit of it. You know, we've said this multiple times before. I think we both agree that, you know, editing is by far probably the best skill that you can have as a filmmaker, because it is one of the most important, in the sense that this is the final product that you have. So, you know, with that kind of being said, is there anything that you would see as like, you know, just some, again, general tips when it comes to editing, or just little things that might save you here, even if it's just saving your sanity to some degree?
I mean, I think so many people focus when you're first starting out, like I was, you fire up Premiere and it's just so daunting. It's really a simple piece of software once you just know how to use it. The real skill with editing comes down to, how do you pace things properly, and how do you essentially like fix like issues, or at least how do you create a scene? So you have all this footage, you have all these different cuts. It's how do you like put that together in the best flowing form? And I think that takes experience. You just have to really get your hours with editing. I'm to the point now, and I still have a long way to go in my editing process, but I know what coverage I got, and then I put it on the timeline. I can kind of see how I want it done in my head before I even start editing it. And it saves me a lot of time, because I could take a scene and just, I'm looking for specific shots for specific reactions. I already know how I'm going to, you know, put it on the timeline. And that's for usually about 67% of the movie. And then there's like 30% of the movie where I just have no idea how I'm going to do this. I need other people's feedback, or I need to try different things. And with each movie, I get better. I know how to do it. You know, I know how to get more done quicker without having those slowdowns, but that's just experience. The more experience I get, the faster I can go. I remember when I first started out, I did like a little sequence from Gone, and it was maybe like a 2-minute sequence, and it took me maybe like 12, 14 hours, very basic, quick cuts. I could probably do that same scene now in maybe an hour. So it's just, the more reps you get, your timeline will condense on how many hours it'll take you to actually do something, because you have like a general idea of how things flow. And just, if you give me a timeline full of footage, I could just scroll through it really quickly. And I'm like, all right, look, reaction shot here, cut wide for this reaction, close up here, and like a hard cut or something to transition us to the next scene. And like, I already have that in my head. So I'm just looking for it in the timeline to try and figure out how to actually get this done. But once again, that just comes from, experience in editing, and it takes a while to get to that point. But with each movie that you do, with each hour that you spend in editing, you get closer to essentially becoming an editing master. And I'm nowhere near my 10,000 hours.
Yeah, I think exactly what you mentioned is really critical. And I don't think there's any excuse for an indie filmmaker not to at least to be able to edit a timeline together. There's absolutely no excuse for that. I mean, realistically, the software is out there. The lessons are out there. If you're serious about filmmaking, you should be serious about every single aspect of the process. And I think it's a thing that, a lot of people just push off, and they say, oh, I'm just not an editor. push us off to an editor, and they play such an important role, and it's so useful. And again, also like what you're saying, you fire at Premiere and it looks crazy, and half the times I'm just struggling that I don't click the wrong window and it just adjusts like 12 different ways. I just wanted to get back to the normal timeline. So it can be daunting in that sense, but like you said, it's just the basic properties of it. And what you were saying, where like you just hopping on a timeline, I'll be editing, I'm organizing all of the footage. I have this nice thing going where basically the first step is just, organizing it all nice and keeping it there. And then I show up back there and someone just put this crazy thing right in the middle of my timeline. It was you. You popped in there, you took a look at something, you threw a LUT on it, you zoomed in on it, and right then you just checked yourself. And it probably took you like 5-10 minutes to just boom, boom, boom. Okay, we have it. And that's just checking to see if it's broken. Like, okay, clear, not broken, good, let's move on. So having an on-site editor, being part of the editing process, that I think this is going to be honestly your most return. I think the most return that you're going to get is putting your hours into editing, because it helps out with the production process and it helps out with pre-production. Is that kind of your thoughts too? If like, where you can level up as a filmmaker?
Yeah, because if you're a new filmmaker, like transition shots or moving characters around in a house or transitioning from one scene to another scene, is difficult. You have to know how you're going to do that beforehand. So now, like in my scripts, I will have how I'm going to transition to the next scene. It's usually like a hard cut, or you cut on action, or like you can do this slow pan in on the characters as they're reevaluating their life choices or something like that. But you have to have that, and because it makes the movie flow properly. You'll watch The Murder House and you'll see how I cut that, and it keeps the pace of the movie going. If you're sitting there and all your transitions are establishing shots, it's going to slow down the movie and it's going to be repetitive. So it's like, you want to really kind of figure out how you're going to do that. And if you have someone editing your movie, they can be like, hey man, we need like another shot here. We need to insert here, or we don't have this shot, or, we're missing something here. And quick pickup, quick insert shot. You can do it while the actors are sleeping. You can wake up early and get it done. It's just really beneficial, because I think beginning filmmakers suffer from pacing the movie properly. And a lot of that comes down to editing, not having cut points in your movie to transition from scene to scene like smoothly. So having an editor will help you out with that, and it will just make your production that much better.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, the most value I brought on the set last time was really kind of like 3 or 4 pickup shots, where I was just like, hey, let's get, Mo walking in like this for the scene, or hey, we need to get like a reverse angle of me stuck in a door, like little basic things. But when you watch the movie, it puts it together, it makes it work. And by doing the editing process yourself, you will be able to understand these. By avoiding the editing process, you'll just never know. And you got to basically have faith that you have a good editor. And then you're at the risk of the other editor. Is this their project? Are they the one making money off of this? Is this just a gig to them? Those are a lot of things that happen. And, if I'm an editor and I have no percentage of distribution or anything like that, why would I blame you for just putting in, the bare minimum effort to get it done? This is your project. You want to be a filmmaker. You have to put in the work. And I think putting in the work in the editing process is going to be really some of the best things that you possibly can do. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the next thing, which is marketing. And we stress this a lot. It'll probably be pretty straightforward. I mean, I feel like we do the same things over and over again. We are doing a lot more this time when it comes to building an active community, but we'll save that for a whole nother episode. So, to me, I think it really comes down to split testing. I think it comes down to being open to changing your baby's name and its poster and those things, letting the market decide those. But what are some of the things that overall, I think we've always had a marketing approach and a business approach to it. But what would you say are just some of the biggest downfalls you see in indie making? What are some of the things that you see are going to be like the most important going into this phase?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have run a business for 10 years. So I understand how, you are not your audience. So what you want might not be what everyone else wants. And I take that to heart. It's almost like a mission statement. I think the highest form of filmmaking is telling the story that you want to tell, but also making it, widely popular, that a large group of people are interested in what you're trying to do. I see a ton of indie films that are just very, very specific, very genre based. They're almost like passion projects for the filmmaker. And then they get upset when they take it to market, and lo and behold, there's only themselves that really like that concept and maybe like 10 other people. Where I think you can take your cool concept, or the concept that's true to your heart, and you could find a way to just mass market it and, get as many people to watch it as possible. Because I think, once again, feedback is the most beneficial thing for you as an indie filmmaker. And you really should be trying to make movies that, people will watch and give you feedback on. And I think a big error that I see is, very genre specific or very pigeonholed ideas that just don't have a broad market appeal. And you're going to have a tough time getting your money back. You're going to have a tough time learning from that. And you're going to have a tough time getting feedback. And on the other side of that, I see a lot of things where it's not specific, but it's like they try and target so many different genres. You'll have like a sci-fi, horror, thriller, comedy, romance. And when you target a ton of people like that, you just turn them off. So it's like you have to know your audience. You have to know what your audience is looking for, and you really got to try and target that. And that's by doing market research before you even make a movie. So if you're doing horror movies, like seeing what horror movies are trending, what do people like? What tropes do people like? What kind of creatures do people like? If you're trying to do a thriller, looking at the top thriller, like what's on chart, like what are the excuse me, what is on like the streaming charts, what's doing well on Netflix? Can I make something similar to this? Like what kind of style and feel are they going for? Because if it's popular on one of these streaming services, or if it's popular on Amazon, at least people like it. Obviously, you would try and find indie films or films around your budget that are popular, that you can kind of try and get ideas from, or try and tailor your idea to like that general audience. But I think you have to really do your market research when trying to select an idea for your movie. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of, this is my story and I want to tell it, and then there's just no audience for their story. Where I have probably about 100 different working scripts right now, and when I'm trying to make the next movie, I'm like, all right, I like these 10. I think these are really cool scripts. And then I go back and I look at each one of them. I'm like, all right, is there a market for this? Did someone do something that was successful, that was similar to this? And if I'm not seeing that data, or if I'm not seeing, other filmmakers having success with that concept, I'll probably try and look at something else.
I think that's a great point, that marketing should start from the very beginning, of the idea. There's a lot of things that, we do horror, we understand what the ideas that are going to work and the ideas that aren't going to work. And we, craft it around having the budget that's, in place. And I think at the very beginning, the first thing we talked about was mindset. And one of the things we mentioned is this your artistic dream, or is this a business that you want to make profit on? Because those are two very different things typically. Now, yeah, the dream is you can tell your story and make money back from it, but very rarely is that the chance, especially at this level. So you really have to identify kind of clearly in your head and accept those, accept the fact that, hey, I might not like this, but, this is it. For instance, The Haunting of the Suicide House is one of my least favorite ones. It did the best. It's one of those things where you know your audience, as you mentioned, and understanding that is really going to go a long way into getting eyeballs on your movie. No longer is making the movie the hard part. The hard part is now getting people to watch your movie. And if you don't understand that, you're going to end up going through this incredibly tough process, and you might be completely disappointed because you upload your video wherever it may be and no one watches it. And you got to put yourself in the best position. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about real quick again, how do we put ourselves in the best position with our split testing? Give us a rundown. How do we go ahead and just try and create the best, most marketable thing that we can? Because I've said it before, realistically, you don't actually need a good movie. You need a good title. You need a good blurb. You need a good cover art. And then you pretty much have 90% of it done.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. we split test our title. I'll come up with 150 different titles that I just split test each one. And then I'll do probably about 30 to 50 different blurbs, split test each one. And we'll probably have about 200, 250 covers, split test each one. You get the winning title, you get the winning cover, you get the winning blurb. And then if you have that trifecta, you're good to go. But it also make you better at just writing blurbs and copywriting in general. You'll start to see the shorter, the better, but you want to kind of keep it as specific and concise as possible. You're going to make sure that the person who goes onto your page to watch your movie knows exactly what that movie is about, but you do want to kind of keep a little bit of air of mystery to it. You don't want to give it away exactly what it is, so that you would get them to click and watch it. And as far as like covers go, you have to have good key art. I mean, it's just number one. You look at Netflix, you look at any of these streaming services, you don't get to the blurb without seeing the cover. And that's the first thing people are going to see. And, don't judge a book by a cover is not true at all. Everyone's going to judge your book and your movie by a cover. So just make sure that, you have the best cover to put yourself in the best position to succeed. And then title, yeah, you might want to call it whatever you want to, whatever you had in your head. It might be like a cool, clever name that you think's cool. That doesn't work as well. You want to really make a title that people will, number one, remember, and number two, that you want to click. And people will not do that. And I would highly recommend having a title that is short and concise, that tells, what your movie is going to be about. And that's easy to remember. And people are going to, once again, like when you're scrolling through all these streaming services, it's going to be your title and your key art that people are going to see first. And before they can even get to the blurb, they have to want to click your movie. So those are the two things that you're going to really need to focus on, just to get people to click on it. And then you want to have a good blurb to make sure that people click like that final button, which is the either purchase now or the stream button.
Yeah. And what you mentioned with the title, I think that's something that you got to learn to almost separate yourself from the creative process a bit, because it is, it's, you're bringing it to life. It's your baby. I totally understand. And, I felt it. I really wanted to call The Haunting of the Morgan Estate The Privileged, because I thought that's super cool. And I was really fighting for it, and it did terribly. And, it's one of those things where if you can understand the business element to it, more so, not so where it's just like, oh, this is just to make money. This is just to make money. Really, it's just to get good. It's just to get reps in. It's just to understand. It's, if I had an unlimited budget for my dream picture, would I be able to even execute on it? I would hope so, but until I make products, until I make a finished movie and learn from it, you just don't know. So you can kind of pull yourself away from that. That's really the big one with it. Again, we're going to do a whole podcast on what it's like for marketing, just because there's a lot of details that go into it. We'll walk you through exactly how our split testing works, but we're going to go ahead. We're going to wrap up with the final element of it. As always, this will be another one that we talk about in detail, but really quickly, I think this is something nowadays that's, there's a lot of different options out there. So I kind of just want to run through, what are your different ways of distribution, from just an upload online to get views, from potentially doing it yourself through an aggregator, from potentially working with an agent to a distributor. Can you give us, Brendan, a quick rundown of maybe the different ways, starting with essentially the easiest way for someone just to get views, and then what ideally is going to be possibly your best way to recoup your money and your costs?
Yeah. And we're new to this. This is Cabin 13 was the first one that was actually good enough to pass quality control for the larger distribution companies. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because I am new at this process. Before, we used to just upload to Amazon, and that was the only platform that we used. Amazon used to pay very, very well. You could get your money back pretty quickly if you had a film that sold and that was good enough to get watched all the way through. That era is gone. The next thing you can do is upload on an aggregator who will pretty much get your movie on different platforms for a flat fee. And it's not bad if you have a marketing budget behind you, you know how to market your film properly. That's usually a pretty good thing because you have, once again, you have control. Film Hub is another one that people are doing very well with right now. And I think they take 20% of whatever revenue, but they have more options. They essentially allow the streaming services to pick and choose what films that they actually want to work with. So it's a little bit different where some aggregators will only get you on 6 or 7 different platforms. Film Hub can get you on a lot more. Pending your movie is good and gets picked up. There's no guarantees in any of that. And then you can use a manager, which is what we're going to try and do with the next movie. And they just essentially create a marketplace for you. They work with a whole bunch of distribution companies. They try and make a bidding war, and then they try and essentially go through the contracts and negotiate it for you to get you just a better deal. When I did Cabin 13, I kind of played that role myself, where we reached out to about 10 or 15 different distribution companies. And I took one offer that was better than the others. And I sent it back to all the other distribution companies, said, can you match this or beat this? And we went back and forth for about 2 or 3 weeks, where we finally got to one where we got an offer, and I sent it out to the other ones. They're like, no, this is like, we can't beat this. This is the offer that, we think this is a good offer. We can't beat this. And that was pretty much the market price of the movie. That was the market price of Girl in Cabin 13. And that was when I decided to go with that distribution company, because I knew there was no other offers. This was the best and final offer I could get. There was no push. I even went back to that company and tried to get an even better deal. And they're like, listen, this is what we can do for you. We can't go any lower, or we can't go any higher, essentially. And that was how I created a marketplace. Now, I believe a manager will have better connections. And especially with some of these distribution companies, they do have premium placement on some of these streaming services. They do have pitch meetings that they go to. But it is a minefield out there. I think I reached out to maybe 20 or 30 distribution companies, and about half of them either had really bad reviews or turned out to be actual like scams, essentially, where they wouldn't have actual accounting. So you have to be careful with who you choose. And obviously, like, a manager would know that they're not going to point you in a wrong direction. So that's the process of that. And we're still learning. I'm hoping to work with the manager on the next one. And then we'll probably either self-upload or try another avenue with another feature that we work on, down the road.
Yeah, and definitely, as you mentioned, this is something where we're still exploring. For the longest time, it was just the direct upload to Amazon, which, as a revenue source, that kind of limits you. And anytime they change the rates, well, that's all we could say, because it's the only access we have. So as we continue to explore those options, we will keep you guys posted on kind of what our experience is, just because it is something you don't really see out there too much, information on distribution, how it works. I think one thing that, we benefit from, specifically with, you having the businesses and everything, we understand contracts and negotiations, and it should be a negotiation. I just say all filmmakers really understand that they're most likely going to get you the best offer for them at first, which could potentially be the worst offer for you, because that is simply business. That is simply how you operate a business. You want the highest margin. So don't take it almost as like an insult or the only option that you have. Take it as the starting ground. Take it as the place where you can say, hey, I'd like to do this. And basically the strategic way that we approached it, like you were saying, is we were going back and forth to kind of see who could kind of get us the best offer on that. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up the second part of the 10 things you should know about indie filmmaking. Again, we're going to make each one of these items a full length video and podcast, because we just think there's a lot more to go into detail, but we kind of wanted to give you a quick highlight and overview. As always, please check us out online. We have a super cool Discord community where you can become a super fan. You can watch our movies before they come out. Whole bunch of insights. We're also happy to work with filmmakers anytime we get the chance, because it's tough out there. If we can help out in any way, we really love to do so. So make sure you guys check in for the next few episodes. We are going to start filming, so we should have some updates on that. But until then, have a good one.